5 most dangerous Chinese fighter jets. Number 5. Shenyang F-7B/Chengdu J-7. China received the majority of the Soviet Union's conventional weaponry technology in the 1950s and early 1960s. One competitor was the MiG-21. The first cooperation was abruptly halted by the Sino-Soviet divide, and on September 1, 1960, the Soviets withdrew their advisors, leading to the project's termination. Later, in a surprise letter to Mao Zedong in February 1962, Soviet Premier Khrushchev offered to transfer MiG-21 technology. The offer was met with suspicion by the Chinese, who saw it as a Soviet attempt at reconciliation. A delegation visited Moscow under the leadership of the commander-in-chief of the PLAAF, a graduate of the Soviet Military University. The agreement on technology transfer was inked. Soviet pilots deployed several MiG-21s to fly in China. A few MiG-21F kits, as well as parts and technical papers, were also sent to China. At the Shenyang aircraft factory, the Chinese found that some of the parts were non-usable and that the technical documents provided by the Soviets were incomplete. Following that, China disassembled a few MiG-21s and started to reverse engineer the aircraft for domestic manufacture. They assert that they have identified and resolved 249 significant issues, as well as duplicated 8 significant technical documents that the Soviet Union did not supply. Fewer than 2,400 F-7s were produced, some as recently as 2013, and they were the final MiG-21s to be made. Number 4. J-8. China started working on developing its all-weather interceptor in 1964, and as a result, the country constructed its first jet fighter to take on new high-altitude threats, such as the Lockheed U-2 espionage plane. The PLAAF felt that the newly launched Chengdu J-7 was unable to battle bombers and espionage planes, thus in 1964 they requested a fighter/interceptor. In 1969, the prototype made its first flight. Despite having its roots in the mid-1960s, the Cultural Revolution's political unrest prevented the J-8 from being constructed until 1979, and it wasn't put into service until 1980. Its fundamental design is similar to a larger version of the J-7 with delta wings. It could reach Mach 2.2 and was powered by 2 Liang LMC Wilton 7 turbojet engines. It was inspired by the MiG-21 design. The side air inlet of the J-8U, the latter version, was derived from the American F-4 Phantom or MiG-23. It was more of a Sukhoi Su-15 replica. Almost 300 were in use at one point. Number 3. Chengdu J-10. The United States and Israel collaborated to create a new combat aircraft in the 1980s that was based on the General Dynamics F-16. However, the United States withdrew from the agreement when expenses increased, leaving Israel's Levi fighter unfinished. Israel gave China extraordinary access to technologies formerly created for the F-16 when it sold China the Levi's development plans. The J-10 and F-16 had more in common than just a striking appearance. The Chengdu J-10, commonly referred to as the Vigorous Dragon, is a lightweight, multi-role fighter aircraft with a single engine that can fly in all weather conditions. It has a canard and delta wing configuration. Its controls are fly-by-wire. Deng Xiaoping gave the program his approval in the 1980s. After a few years, in January 1988, work began in reaction to the American F-15 and S-16, as well as the Mikoyan MiG-29 and Sukhoi Su-27 flying in the USR. Similar to J-7IE, the principal designer was the same. The aircraft was originally intended to be a specialized fighter, but it eventually acquired other roles. The Russian Siberian Aeronautical Research Institute SIBIA declared its intent to take part in the J-10 project in 2006. Additionally, SIBIA engineers thought that the J-10 included a melting pot of foreign technology and acquired design methods, making it more or less a version of the II Lavi. January 2007 saw the formal unveiling of the J-10. J-1001, the prototype, is said to have been unveiled in November 1997 and made its first flight on March 23, 1998. Produced in 2002, the aircraft series was formally introduced into PLAAF service in 2006. To date, about 700 have been constructed. China made tremendous advancements over the fighters they were using at the time, which were from the 1960s, thanks to the technology they acquired through Israel. Although it's the most straightforward, this Chinese fighter won't be the last to use F-16 components. J-10B has been improved to become J-10C. It is outfitted with the new long-range PL-15 air-to-air missile AM, the infrared homing PL-10, and an indigenous active electronically scanned array AESA fire control radar. The export variant of the J-10 is the single-seat multi-role fighter jet, or JC-10CE. With the WS-10B thrust vectoring control engine, the J-10B TVC demonstrator is a J-10B-based prototype fighter. The sole foreign customer to purchase the 36 J-10CE is the Pakistan Air Force PAF-20 delivered 16 on order. Number 2. Shenyang J-11 16th. The British Rolls-Royce Spey 512 engine was the engine of choice for a newly developed light fighter that the Shenyang aircraft manufacturer suggested in the 1970s. It would ascend faster than the MiG-21 and be more maneuverable than the MiG-19. The J-11, an air superiority fighter based on the Soviet-designed Sukhoi Su-27 SK, was eventually formed in 1998 when China inked a $2.5 billion production deal that allowed it to produce 200 Su-27 SK aircraft using components supplied by Russia. As per the deal, Russian engines, radars, and avionics would be installed in these aircraft. However, Shenyang's co-production of the basic J-11 was reportedly stopped in 2004 after about 100 examples were constructed, according to Russian media. Later, in mid-2002, the PLAAF unveiled a mock-up of an updated multi-role J-11. The indigenous J-11B version had several Chinese material enhancements and airframe modifications using better manufacturing techniques. In addition, it had Chinese-made radar, avionics suites, and weapons, including PL-12 air-to-air missiles and anti-ship missiles, which were probably intended to be used as part of a maritime attack aircraft. The PLAAF reportedly demanded that the J-11's production line be abruptly stopped because of outdated avionics and radar, which were designed for aerial missions and other components. Russian media stated in 2002 that the Chinese were considering substituting domestic Chinese-made parts for Russian-made J-11/Su-27 SK components. In particular, to swap out the Chinese-made PL-9 and PL-12 AAMs for the Russian-made R-77 AAMs, the Chinese-made AL-31F engine for the WS-10A, and the Chinese-made fire control radar based on the Type 147X/KLJX family for the Russian-made NIIP N001 radar. In 2002, a single J-11 was captured on camera with a WS-10A engine and an AL-31F mounted for testing. However, information on the domestic J-11 was not made public by the Chinese government until 2007. Nevertheless, sources from Russian media have suggested that China still plans to replace the engines in the J-11 fleet with Salyut or Saturn Lilka power plants. Among the engines being considered was the Saturn AL-31-117S, which was a Lilka AL-31F improvement intended for the Indian Su-30 MKI. The WS-10's integration with the J-11 and serial manufacturing turned out to be more challenging than anticipated. Because of this, these aircraft were later grounded for an extended period due to poor operational reliability, even though numerous comparable prototypes had been tested and at least one regiment had switched to the Taihang-powered J-11B version in 2007. According to a Washington Times investigation, the Chinese engines required maintenance after 30 hours, whereas the Russian engines required maintenance after 400 hours. The engine manufacturer was found to be responsible for the defects as they used inadequate manufacturing and quality control methods. A few more batches briefly switched back to the original Russian AL-31F turbofans. The engine production issues were successfully resolved by the end of 2009, and it was stated that the WS-10A was now sufficiently mature to power the Block 02 aircraft. The validity of the J-11/J-11B remained unsubstantiated even after a plethora of materials surfaced since 2007. Alexander Foreman, deputy director of Russia's Federal Service for Military Technical Cooperation, stated during a press conference at the 2009 Farnborough Air Show that Russia has not yet sent China any inquiries about copying military hardware. According to Foreman, China was granted permission by Russia to produce the aircraft and its parts, along with an agreement on the creation of intellectual property rights. Number 1. Shenyang J-15. The People's Liberation Army Navy's P-LAN 4th-generation twin-jet fighter, dubbed the Flying Shark, is the Shenyang J-15. It is created by reverse engineering J-11B after a Su-33 prototype is stripped down. The T-10K3, an incomplete Su-33 prototype, was purchased from Ukraine in 2001 and is rumored to have undergone substantial research and reverse engineering. J-15 development started right away following that. Although the J-15's structural design seems to be derived from the Su-33 prototype, the homegrown fighter incorporates J-11B program avionics along with Chinese technologies. Several Chinese media agencies reported in February 2018 that the aircraft was supposed to be replaced and claimed it belonged to the fourth or fifth generation of fighters. China's principal carrier-based aircraft is the J-15, which, had China had its wish, would have been constructed by just buying the Su-33, Russia's carrier-capable version of the Su-27 production line. Thanks for watching. Kindly subscribe to our channel for more.